Hello, I'm Dr. Eric Allen Williams, affectionately known as Dr. E. Yes, you can call me Dr. E. Hopefully, by the end of today's session, you will be strengthened, empowered, and able to execute the strategies presented. Thank you so much for joining us, and grab a cup of coffee. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to ELA Support for multi-grade levels. And I'm your host, Dr. E. I want you to look at this picture right here. It says that special education teacher, because multitasking ninja isn't an official job title. We applaud all of you who are multi-grade level teachers. You do it all for our students to ensure that they are successful. And I want to introduce you to some amazing people, individuals, educators who help propel our district to the next level. And they are our SPED support team, Dr. Marlene Pangantugan, also Miss Lee Merrill, and Vicki Wayne. They will be presenting on today. At the conclusion of this presentation, you should be able to identify the following: address IEP goals, recognize the roles and responsibilities, schedule for instruction, plan and implement Tier 1 activities for multi-grade levels, and finally highlight unfinished learning targets. Now, the content addressed in this presentation does not, I repeat, does not replace instruction, that core instruction for each grade level. It is a non-negotiable that each student receive ELA core instruction on grade level. So if you teach 2 to 3 grades, each student should receive instruction, the core instruction on that grade level. Now, when we go to our small groups, we'll talk about how that works or how that looks, but core instruction should always be on grade level. Now, we're going to dive into our presentation. Our first point, addressing IEP goals. How do we incorporate IEP goals into the lesson? First of all, we build them around the standards. We have the Louisiana Department of Education standards, so we can go to the LDOE website to look at those standards. And then we find the specific IEP goals, objectives to practice and embed within the grade level units of study. And we're so grateful to have the Caddo ELA website, which has the lessons there for you, the objectives, support strategies. All of that is embedded there to help you in developing those IEPs. So first of all, we need to have some type of assessment or data to help formulate those goals to determine where the gaps are. And once we determine where the gaps are, we look at the standards to address those gaps. Now, the standards are on grade level, but many of our supports may be off grade level in our RTI and small groups, but all students need that core instruction on grade level, okay? We're gonna emphasize that on today. We need to make sure that we're providing core instruction with supports that may be off grade level, but core instruction must be on grade level. And we align it to the curriculum. We need to make sure that we are knowledgeable of the curriculum pieces, okay? So we may need to attend some PD to help us sharpen our skills and begin to develop that so that we can provide the skills necessary for those students to achieve a high quality education or high quality instruction. And we know that the standards are tied to our assessments. So if we teach the standards, if we align our IEPs with the standards, then we will see the necessary progress that we need. Now, I know that there are some gaps there for our students, but we should be able to chart some level of success because we're giving them the skills and we're targeting those deficits through our IEP goals. Now, the IEP decision-making process, we must develop meaningful IEPs that, of course, that apply to the state standards and that they also address individual student needs. So when we look at the IEP, individualized educational plan, it must be individual. And we look at the things necessary, such as that data, to help determine that. Also, we do the progress monitoring to chart the level of success for that student. If that student is not being successful, we've given them an assessment, we provided the instruction, we need to go back, we've given them the supports that they need. Then we need to go and check to see, is the student making progress? If they're not making progress, maybe we need to revisit the IEP and maybe amend it to address those deficits. We focus discussions on access, participation, and progress. And then we provide appropriate instructional supports to ensure the student achieves at higher levels in a standards based system. Just because the student has an exceptionality does not mean they are not entitled to a high quality education. How do we know it's high quality? If we're using the curriculum that we have with our district. Make sure that we visit the district website. Make sure that we're knowledgeable of the district curriculum for ELA, for math, and for all our core subjects, so that we can give that student the skills that they need. When we do not teach the standards, then the student misses those critical pieces in order for them to be successful. And we know that our curriculum is built around college and career readiness. Say that with me: college, career readiness. So everything that we teach is tied to that. So we can't skip pieces. We make sure that we follow the pacing guide, especially for ELA. The pacing guide is there for us. We use those tools such as the supports flowchart, which we will cover later, and also the writing revolution helps us to give those students the skills that they need to thrive. Instructional areas for goal writing. We need to look at, how do we develop these goals? We want to embed them in the curriculum, but they must be well designed. They must be relevant to the individual student. They have to be relevant to them. The days of just going to a IEP goal bank is not enough. Yes, we have the template there to help us create the verbiage, but it must be rooted and grounded in individual student needs and the standards. Also, it's associated with a path to promotion or graduation. The graduation or promotion, that's the top of the mountain. But we need those steps. We need those well-written IEPs. We need high quality instruction. We need data. We need progress monitoring in order for that student to be successful later in life. It needs to be rigorous, but yet reasonable. It has to be just enough for that student to push and to propel them in the future, and so that they want to be successful. Not so easy that they don't have any type of aspirations to succeed, but it must be that they need to work and dive into the curriculum to be successful, and attainable in a time frame. So within an IEP year, our students should be able to attain those goals. And if we are experiencing any delays or setbacks, we need to go back and revisit the IEP, because the IEP is a living document. What are measurable annual goals? Now, they have to be measurable.
Hi, I am Dr. Marlene Pangatungan. I am a SPED teacher and a lead teacher at Oak Park Elementary School. My task is to give you an information on how to address an IEP goals in general. Two things you have to remember. First, you have to make sure that the goals you write on the IEP is aligned to the state standard. The second, you make sure that your goals have SMART goals. SMART means specific, measurable, attainable, results oriented, and time bound. So, for example, if your child is struggling in reading, like decoding, comprehension, or fluency, you have to make sure that each of those weakness area should have SMART goals related. So let me read to you very quickly an example of an IEP goals using a reading standard. So if the standard is students will read with sufficient accuracy and fluency to support comprehension, and that is reading fluency point 4. The goal will be by the end of the school year, the student will be able to read grade level text orally with accuracy, appropriate rate, and expression at 90 words per minute with 75% accuracy over an IEP period as measured by teacher's documentation log. So remember, when you write an IEP goals, you have to make sure that it is aligned to the state standards, and you have to make sure that your goals have SMART goals. Thank you.
All right, let's look at the roles and responsibilities. What are my classroom expectations? The role of the special education teacher. First, we need to complete and maintain all assigned student records. That includes the IEP, documentation, progress report. It needs to be organized and easily accessible. Of course, it needs to be secure in a file cabinet. We need to maintain a collaborative relationship and goodwill with general educators because there will be points of contacts in regards to our students because we definitely want them to succeed and we need that ongoing communication to make that happen. Also, we want to study the curriculum, student data, and the standards, then plan accordingly. So we need to be familiar with the curriculum. We look at the data to see what gaps are there. And then we look at the curriculum to see what supports are embedded in there so that we can plan for instruction. And of course, always, we have to review the standards to know what is the expectations for each particular grade level. And finally, we need to create a schedule for the paraprofessional. How will they know what to do unless we create that schedule? Now, the role of the paraprofessional, they must have a willingness to learn new strategies. We have so much um, a wealth of information, a lot of strategies, a lot of new concepts that we have to learn. But we need to share that also with the paraprofessional, things that will entail their job. Especially giving support to students, we need to be familiar with the supports that are out there so that we can provide that insight and wisdom to the paraprofessional. They must have a commitment to treating everyone with respect, especially our students and our adults. Being positive in all interactions, especially building rapport with the students, because many times the paraprofessional will have the eyes and the ears of the classroom, and they'll notice and see things that we may not see because we're providing the instruction, but they're providing the support. So we need to make sure that we have a line of communication that we can know exactly what's going on. And they need to be actively involved with children every minute of the instructional day. So there's not a lot of downtime. We need to be very strategic when we're planning for the paraprofessional because as the special education teacher, we provide the instruction and the paraprofessional provides the support. And of course, we support it as well, but primarily we are the instructor and the paraprofessional provides that support. And when we work together, we create a dynamic team. Now, how do we support that learning? We collaborate with each other, the paraprofessional and the special education teacher. We focus on individual needs. So we need to look and see exactly what supports are needed for each particular student. So we need to even look and see, are there any similar supports? So when we're doing our grouping, we know exactly how to place the groups together so that we can be effective in our instruction. And sometimes if we'll do a lot of overworking or we'll overdo things because we didn't take the time to plan. Also, we need to review students' work often. The para and the special education teacher, we need to go over the work and see what concerns we may have. We're addressing the IEPs, but also we need to look at the day-to-day operation to see where our students struggle because that helps us to determine what supports are needed. Also, with IEP planning and progress monitoring. So those are things we need to consider when supporting learning. Now, how do we document that support? If I, the special education teacher, provides support in the regular ed setting, or the para provides the support, we need to complete the inclusion documentation log. I wanted to show you this really quick. Some of you may be familiar with it, but if you go to the DOEC, the Department of Exceptional Children website, the Department of Exceptional Children Instruction website, DOEC Instruction, if you Google that, you will find it. And I placed a link in the slide. So we look at some of the things to consider when we are completing this. We need to put the date, the time of service, any missing assignments. Also, one thing important, we need to make sure that the general education teacher initials each day that we provide support in the regular ed classroom. This is in the regular ed classroom, not the special education classroom. So the para or the special education teacher, if they go out and provide support in that general education setting, this form needs to be completed daily. And it's one sheet per student. We put any missing assignments, even if we're pulled out for class. We need to make sure that we place that the student's name, the school's name, the inclusion service provider, and the teacher with IEP authority. So if you have the IEP authority, you would place your name there, and the person providing the service and whoever provides the service also needs to sign here. If it's a paraprofessional, they need to turn this form in to you, and you need to develop your own organizational system for completing that and compiling those documents. All right, so here's a question. The general education teacher does not need to initial each day verifying the inclusion support provided by the special education teacher, co-teacher, or paraprofessional. Is this true or false? We just went over this, but I wanted to review it because there will be an evaluation later, all right? False. A general education teacher needs to initial that, all right? And you need to converse with them to see exactly how that will be done, and what time do you do it, what time management system. Some people do it at the end of the week, or they may do it daily, but it needs to be completed. It needs to be initial, whatever format you all come up with. There needs to be some form of that. You need to give that sheet to the general education teacher so they can complete that. Now, how do we handle conflict between the teacher and the paraprofessional? We must schedule a meeting at a mutual time. So if we're having any concerns, we need to make sure that's at a mutual time that we can discuss those things. Now, when we meet, we need to use I statements. For instance, I have a few ideas for modifying JC's classwork. So we do need to confront what we're doing, but we need to do it in a proactive manner. So conflict is not a bad thing. Conflict is just a matter of coming to a mutual agreement or understanding. So it's okay to have it, but we need to schedule those times. Finally, we need to avoid emotional charged language such as, "You never provide me with plans or ideas." We can't be reactive. We must be proactive when it comes to conflict management. Now, Ms. Lee Merrill is going to come and she's going to talk to us about effective collaboration with paraprofessionals. Be a team.
Hi, my name is Lee Merrill, and I just finished my third year as a multi-grade level special ed teacher. It has its rewards and its challenges, but one of its best rewards is getting to work with amazing paraprofessionals. What will we do without them? I am using the word team to kind of give you some steps on how to effectively collaborate with your para. The T in team is take time to get to know your para. Find out about them personally, about their strengths and their weaknesses. When you take the time to get to know them, you're going to know how to effectively utilize them in the classroom. E, explain your expectations and put them in writing. I recommend having a para binder with district and school and classroom information, documentation forms, any kind of information that they need, IEP at a glance for the students, whatever you think is important to put in there, and you can update and add to that binder throughout the year. A is accept your para as a partner. Make sure they realize that you see them as an equal, that you respect them. Insist that the children also respect them as the professional that they are. If you treat them as a professional, then chances are they are going to thrive as a professional. And M is make time for co-planning and professional development. Sit down and go over your plans together. Make sure they understand what's around the bend. Let them be involved in the planning. And then if there's any new strategies that you've learned, share them with your para, train them so that y'all can be on the same page, and make sure that you recommend to them professional developments in the district that the district offers. I hope these tips are helpful, and I hope you have a great year with your para.
All right, let's talk about scheduling. How do I schedule for multiple grade levels? The content addressed in this section does not replace the core instruction for each grade level. It is a non-negotiable that each student receive ELA core instruction on grade level. So make sure that each student receive their core instruction on grade level. Now, I want you to think about this. How much time do you have for small groups versus whole groups? How much time do you have for small groups versus whole groups? Realistically, I want you to think about that. We know when we're talking about whole group versus small groups, our core content must be on grade level and align with the curriculum. And our small groups may be slightly off grade level, but also align with district and statewide content. So we're not pulling anything off Pinterest, and we're not pulling things out the air. We're making sure that we're using the content to drive our instruction. Now let's look at some possible schedules. Here's one for 120 minutes. Now, this may differ based on the school site that you're at, but here's a possible schedule. So if we had 2 grade levels, realistically, we may be able to do 45 minutes per grade level for core content, and then 30 minutes to address skills in RTI. And again, the RTI that's based on the data, progress monitoring, benchmark testing to help determine what skills need to be addressed, and also the curriculum, what gaps, the data tracker, what gaps are there, and we can address those in the RTI setting. Let's look at the sample framework. We have 150 minutes, 30 minutes for RTI here, 45 minutes again for those core, for the core content, and then 30 to 60 minutes for small groups. This will vary based on what school site. So while the special education teacher is providing instruction in core, the paraprofessional could work on some activities such as TBR, TWR, the writing revolution, sentence activities to help build their student skill set, also address some of the deficits, maybe building background knowledge for the lesson, for the core content lesson. Those are some activities that could be used in the alternate group with the paraprofessional. Here's another framework for a 100-minute block schedule. So you want to look at, you have the entrance tickets, whole group RTI, independent work, and then you have your core guidebook. So this can be modified, and this is more relative to a middle school setting. So if you're in middle school, you may see something familiar with this schedule. So this is something that you can use for that. I want you to think about this question. Which groups will receive instruction slightly off grade level but aligned with statewide and district supports? Think about that question. Let's see. RTI, of course, small groups, maybe some intensive groups, some students who may have some severe deficits. So they would, of course, they would be off grade level. But the key thing is that they're aligned with statewide and district supports. You can always go to Caddo ELA and also the RTI website to see what those supports are. So we're going to plan and proceed. How do I plan for and instruct multiple small groups? Here's some steps. First of all, I need to identify the academic deficit. We need to be very specific about what that deficit is. And we can't just guesstimate on this. We have to make sure what it is. How do we find out? We use, of course, our data to determine where that student is. We can look at some work samples to also look at that, but we need a plethora of works of documents to help us determine what that academic deficit is. Then we identify, we link that to the appropriate standard because the standards drive our curriculum and our instruction. And also the standards, also the goal of that is for students to be college and career ready. So it's important that we cover those standards. We define the outcomes of instruction. We identify the instructional activities, and the activities in our small groups will all be tailored around and centered around that academic deficit, which is based on the standards. And so if we have all of the steps 1 through 4, we should be able to target those specific goals from the IEP. And of course, the IEP goals are tied to what? The standards. So we use our data to see what the deficit is, then we address it through the standards, and also we create an IEP goal based on those standards because we want our students ultimately to be successful and independent later in life. So we have some supports here. We have the supports flowchart, and then we have the writing revolution. So if you have not attended some of the trainings and sessions, please attend the sessions with the writing revolution. But I wanted to take you to the supports flowchart if you're not familiar with that. If you join our ELA supports classroom, I'm going to go there. Let's see if we can get there. We're going to try to bypass. Yes, we're going to bypass the Zoom. Okay. So if we go to our ELA supports for diverse learners, and diverse learners encompasses all students with disabilities, all students who receive special education services that can be gifted and talented, whatever, it's a gamut of exceptionalities. But let's look here. If we go to the supports flow chart, remember when we talked about the 5 steps? This helps us with that. We can look at possible issues if you're observing certain things in your classroom. Here are the possible issues would be in this column. Of course, it's a link to standards. That's what the student is unsuccessful at achieving. But this is what we're observing. These are the possible issues, and these are the possible supports. Okay. And it's also the supports flow chart is focused on individualized needs. And when we think about individualized needs, we think about, of course, the IEP. Then we can make decisions based on student results. Okay. And it helps us to create a goal. So what that looks like, we have the possible issues right here, the observations. The student reads inaccurately and does not blend syllables of a word. Okay, they cannot blend those. These are the possible issues. Lacks knowledge of monosyllabic phonic elements. So we would go to this activity. We can click on this activity right here. We can click on that activity also. Work with students on developing awareness of English phonemes not present in the student's home language. So it gives you some possible support. So everything that you need is right here to develop those groups, to develop that IEP, to, when we write the IEP, we always need to provide some type of strategy to help that student be successful. Here are those strategies here. So this is a gold mine for those when we're creating our IEP goals. We have all that. We have that here for ELA to help us in driving our instruction, but also providing those specific activities that are tailor made for that student and addressing those gaps that are there. So let's go back to our presentation. That was a support flow chart. And again, that's in our Google ELA Support Google Classroom. And I'll give you that code in a few minutes, okay? What about addressing unfinished learning? What did students miss due to COVID-19? We are living in an unprecedented time where many of our students are really struggling, their parents are struggling financially. And so that could cause a lot of trauma to a student. And so there are going to be some gaps when we return back to school, whether it's virtually or whether it's face to face. We need to be prepared for that. So, how do we prepare for the unfinished learning? Okay. We can look at the pacing chart. I want you to go look at this. You can go to the Cato ELA website to look at how the pacing will be next year. Okay. You have third through eighth grade, and that's what we're addressing, the third through eighth grade. Okay. All of your grade levels are here. Okay. So we can look at where we can start now planning to see what are we going to cover in the fall. Now, we go back to our presentation. Here are some things to consider in regards to unfinished learning. Are there skills that the student missed over time? And yes, they are. So we can go back and look at March 16th until the end of school to see what are some of those skills that students miss. Do the objectives need to be clustered or chunked? So if you have multiple grade levels, maybe we can find some skills or standards that are similar and group them in our small groups. Remember when we said that our small groups can be slightly off grade level, but we can group those small groups. Now, our core is always on grade level, so we're not going to do this for core, but we can use this as a model to help us drive our small group planning. Okay. Then third question, how can specially designed instruction make the biggest impact toward performance in the grade level curriculum? So how can specially designed instruction? So we would go to, I want to show you some examples of what you could do. Let's go to grades 3 through 5. All right. Here's an example of that. And you can go to, again, please join our Google Classroom and you can look at these documents. So we looked at third through fifth grade, and we found some similar standards that were missing due to COVID-19. And then we looked at the pacing for the fall right here. This is the curriculum. And then we found an activity to address these standards while using the curriculum for the fall, because we don't want to go back and pull the actual text from the spring, but we need to use unit 1 in the fall. So what we can do is in our small group time, we can address, and this is just a suggestion, this is not a commandment, but it's a suggestion of what you can do to begin planning for those deficits, because they will appear, and we'll get further guidance because things are changing as we speak due to COVID-19. So we don't know what the future holds, but we want to give you a heads up. So you can go begin to look at those standards that the students gaps that are there. Look at the text for unit 1 in the fall, and also some activities that may build their knowledge base in those standards, asking to answer questions to demonstrate understanding. So third and fourth grade, these are some similar standards that are there. So when you're doing your grouping for small groups, think about putting them all together, but You're getting more bang for your buck because you're pulling all of those standards together. You're using the curriculum also, and you're using the supports here. Here's some supports that you can use that are pulled from fcrr.org. And if you're not familiar with that, you can go there and check that out. From Learn Zillion, from also the guidance, not the guidance document, but for the unit or Learn Zillion or the guidebooks, you can begin to look at those to help drive that instruction in that small group setting, because we definitely want our small groups to be aligned with the standards. We don't want to do anything in isolation. So we see here it's standards based. Also, we're using the curriculum, and then we have an example. If you go to our Google Classroom, we have some examples of 5 days of how you could possibly look at these activities to see how you can begin to build on these activities, and also how you can address that unfinished learning in the fall. Now, how could this look like? What would this look like in grades 6 through 8? Here we have, I can cite relevant text evidence, and our SPED support team, they are phenomenal. They are instrumental in helping to pull some of this data together, pull some of this information together to see how can we plan for that unfinished learning. And one of the things you need to begin thinking about is, how will I address unfinished learning in the fall? We need to begin looking at what was missing in the spring to help determine those small groups. So we have some common standards here for grades 6 through 8. We have the text for the activity, and then we have the activity here, and also some additional resources that could assist, okay? And that's for grades 6 through 8. And of course, you can modify this if you only work with 2 grades, or you can adjust it for that, all right? So we've talked about our unfinished learning. We've talked about addressing IEP goals, scheduling, and planning. So if you need to, we definitely want you to go and look at and visit our ELA Support Google Classroom. We want you to go in and type in that code, not now, but you can do that at a later date. But we have a special, one of our SPED team members is coming at this time to show you how to pull the schedule and planning all together, Miss Vicki Wayne.
Hello, I'm Vicki Wayne, Special Ed ELA teacher at Walnut Hill Elementary Middle School. When developing a schedule for a self-contained resource or inclusion setting, you will find different scenarios for each school. Whether you have block schedule or a full inclusion setting, there are 3 commonplace factors to ensure our students get specialized intervention and support. Number 1, lay out your time slots. Create a document with students' names, IEP minutes, availability of support from your paraprofessionals, and your non-negotiables, such as lunch, recess, duties, etc. Look at ability grouping, grade levels, and specific IEP goals that the student needs to master. Number 2, include expectations for each day of the week to address one skill at a time. Look for opportunities for small group versus whole group. Schedule a one-on-one time to ensure each student's IEP progress can be monitored. Share your schedule with your administration, regular education teachers, and make sure the paraprofessional has a schedule as well. Create time slots for them to work on specific one-on-one IEP goals with the students. And lastly, revise. With the outstanding planning of our teachers, coupled with the dedicated support of our paraprofessionals, we will see students constantly growing academically. It all starts with a well thought out schedule.
Hello, we are ecstatic that you joined us for our learning experience on today. And we need you to do three things. First, complete the evaluation mentioned at the end of the session. Secondly, we need you to implement the strategies presented because that will enhance your instruction. And finally, we want you to like, send, and share this information with your colleagues. Nelson Mandela, an icon and world leader, once said, "Education is the most powerful tool we can use to change the world." So go out and be a world changer. Thank you and join us for future sessions.